I didn't read the text right away. I saw the preview light up my phone while I was standing in line for coffee, the same way it always did my mother's name. Clipped punctuation, urgency disguised as normalcy. Mortgage is due tomorrow. Can you send your part today? I stared at it long enough for the barista to ask if I was ordering. I put the phone face down on the counter and ordered anyway. It wasn't anger that slowed me. It was the odd calm that comes when something finally fits into a pattern you've been pretending not to see. 2 weeks earlier, they told me over dinner, mid-meal, between updates about a neighbor's surgery and a comment about the weather, that the house would be going to my sister. The way you say something obvious, like a decision already accepted by the room. She needs the stability, my father said. She's always been more suited to it, my mother added, as if suitability were a measurable trait. I nodded. I always did. I'd learned that nodding kept things smooth. I'd my own place after all. I was doing fine. That phrase had followed me since my 20s, a soft explanation for why I didn't need things other people needed. They used the word deserved once. Not dramatically, just placed on the table like a fact. I finished my coffee before replying. I didn't draft. I didn't explain. I typed one sentence, ask the owner. Then I put the phone away. That should have been the end of it, but silence is rarely neutral in families like mine. Silence is a disruption. It's a refusal to carry weight you've been assigned without consent. The rest of that day passed normally. Work emails, a grocery run, a half-listened podcast on the drive home. Every now and then, I'd think about the house, not the building itself, but the assumption wrapped around it, that the financial responsibility would float unattached until it found me. No follow-up text came that night, or the next morning. On the second day, my phone rang from an unfamiliar number while I was in a meeting. I let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later, it rang again. Same number. I stepped into the hallway. "This is Daniel Moore," the voice said when I answered. "I'm calling regarding a property matter involving your parents." His tone wasn't aggressive. It was unsettled, like someone realizing mid-sentence that the floor plan they'd memorized didn't match the building. "I'm listening," I said. There was a pause, paper shifting. "There seems to be some confusion about ownership and payment responsibilities," he said carefully. "Your parents indicated you were contributing to the mortgage, but the deed transfer finalized last month lists your sister as sole owner." I leaned against the wall. The hallway smelled faintly of copier toner. "Yes," I said. "That's correct." Another pause, longer this time. "Then you're not contractually obligated." "No," I said again. Not sharper, just complete. He exhaled, the sound of someone recalculating. "They were under the impression I know," I said. And I did. Impressions had always done a lot of work in my family. We ended the call politely. Professionally. When I hung up, my hands were steady. That surprised me more than anything. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It came in fragments. A voicemail from my mother, breath tight, asking me to call back. A text from my sister that read, "Why are you doing this?" Another message from my father, longer, explaining how families help each other, and how this was never meant to be a legal thing. I didn't respond immediately. Not out of strategy, out of recognition. I finally understood that responding quickly had always been part of how I kept myself small. Availability as a form of compliance. When I did reply, it was brief. "I'm not doing anything," I wrote. "I'm just not paying for something I don't own." That sentence landed harder than I expected, not because it was cruel, but because it was clean. There was no emotional cushioning, no apology tucked inside. The lawyer called again later that afternoon. This time his tone was brisk, controlled. The panic had shifted away from me. "There will need to be a reassessment," he said. "Your parents assumed interim support that doesn't align with the documentation. We'll be advising them accordingly. Authority doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just removes ambiguity." That night, I sat alone in my apartment. Lights low, the city humming outside. I thought about how often I'd been told I was independent, as if it were a compliment that justified exclusion. How often responsibility had followed me even when ownership hadn't. My sister didn't call. She sent one last message instead. "I didn't know it worked like this." I stared at that sentence for a long time. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an accusation either, just a statement floating between ignorance and entitlement. I typed, deleted, then finally replied, "Now you do." The house didn't come back to me. There was no reversal, no dramatic family meeting where everything was rebalanced. What changed was quieter. My parents stopped assuming. Conversations became careful, edged with a formality that hadn't existed before. Invitations came with clearer expectations. Financial topics, once vague and communal, were now specific. The relationship with my sister cooled, not shattered, just altered. Less reliance, more distance. A stiffness that hadn't been there before. And me? I felt different in a way that was hard to describe. Not empowered in a cinematic sense, just aligned. I'd learned something specific and unglamorous. Dignity doesn't always arrive with reconciliation. Sometimes it arrives with paperwork, with silence, with a lawyer's voice saying what you already knew, but hadn't been allowed to enforce. The entitlement didn't collapse in flames. It collapsed in daylight, under scrutiny, when accountability showed up and asked the simple question, who actually owns this? And for once, the answer wasn't me carrying something that was never mine.